In this video, I want to do the part 2 of the routing tab. In part 1, we went over the input routing, the USB returns, and the USB output routing. We had somebody on the forum mention that they had done a 16-track recording, but all tracks got nothing but kick. It actually didn't happen in the XR18 routing tab, but what they had inadvertently done in the DAW software was had channel 1 of the device, which in this case was the XR18, and where the kick was plugged in, was routed to every channel of USB. And so all they got was kick on the recording. So keep that in mind. Make sure you realize that the default setting is going to work for most things if you want to do a one-to-one recording where input 1 goes to 1, input 2 goes to 2, etc. I wish there was a default button over here so that when we want to go back to default, or if you've got things messed up, you could just go back and have this automated. And I'm off, so I'm going to have to do that again. All right, so that's our default back there. And of course, I'm in 2x2 mode right now with the left-right being recorded out channels 1 and 2. Okay, so the big thing I want to point out, and this is something that I'm just now realizing myself, and that's the power of the Ultranet. We know that the USB outputs 18 channels to a DAW for recording, and that's pretty powerful. So not only do we have the 6 XLR buses that we can use, plus the left-right, so we have 8 XLRs of typical output that we would expect to see on any analog mixer. Of course, we also have the USB output, which gives us the 18 outputs that we're more and more familiar with now on digital consoles. But something that's pretty unique to Behringer is their Ultranet and the P16 output. Now, you do have to have an external device to implement this, but what it does could be a lifesaver for a lot of bands out there. We all know that you can do your monitor mixes with an iPad or an iPhone or an Android phone, but it's pretty limited because you're using XLR outputs and you don't have any real separate DSP, EQ, and things like that. And it might be actually kind of complex to go through and do that on a phone. And I've had a couple instances where one band member messed up somebody else's mix or even the main mix if they weren't on sends to fader mode. So the P16 network called Ultranet is another 16 outputs that can get its sources from any of these over here in the left-hand menu. So typically, if you've got a band with running 16 mics, a one-to-one output is going to give every person with a P16M monitor mixer the ability to mix anything that they want to their in-ears and pan it left or right in stereo and do a 3-band EQ on any of those 16 sources. And that's something that you're simply not going to be able to get by just mixing with a tablet device for one of your aux mixes or monitor mixes. So the 16 outputs is real similar to the USB outputs. You're going to be able to source anything from this left tab. So this makes the P16 option really powerful, and you do have to, again, buy one of their P16Ms for $249, but for $249, you're getting a much better monitor mixing system. That P16M can feed a wedge, powered or unpowered, or headphones or in-ears. And again, that's going to allow you to do stereo mixes, which is going to be a lot easier than grouping 2 of the auxes in stereo and then trying to mix left-right stereo sends to a coupled pair of the XLR outputs. All right, and the next tab is the aux outputs tab, and that's simply asking where do you want the 6 XLRs on the front of your XR18 to get their feeds from. Now, if you come down here, you'll see the default, which makes sense. It's going to be your 6 buses, which are actually these 6 buses up here that we use for our monitor sends or our subwoofer on 6 if you're doing that. But if for some reason you didn't want that to be a bus, you again have all these options in the left-hand bar over here. You could route any input directly to any of the auxes. You could route effects directly out. Of course, your buses are here. You could route your main left-right mix, and that's something that's going to be very useful for a lot of people. So for example, if you wanted to send your mix not only out the XLRs left-right, but also aux outputs 5 and 6, you could simply come down here. Now, the aux outputs 5 and 6 have nothing to do with these aux sends over here. So if you do something here in aux 5 and 6, nothing's going to happen. Those XLR outputs 5 and 6 are simply going to get the same mix that's going to your left-right. And the last tab over here is pretty simple. It's just asking, what do you want to send to your left-right output? And of course, it's going to be your main mix typically. You could send USB 1 and 2. So if you're doing a 2-track recording and you want to monitor that back directly, you could just go ahead and assign that there. And then your headphone output on the front jack. What do you want to send to that? Now, if you put that here, not much is going to change, but if you solo something, you're not going to hear that because the solo function is in the setup menu, and I'll show you that here. So this monitor tab is where you actually select what you're monitoring in the monitor section or headphone section. And we're monitoring the left-right. We'll also hear channel solos and bus solos. We can dim the source if we select this so that when we hit solo, it'll dim. We have our level here, so if this is down, you won't get much headphone volume. So I've had a few people have this turned way down. And you can also monitor in mono here. So this right here selects what you're going to hear in this position here. All right, so that's the basic overview of P16, your aux outputs, and how you can remap those so they can do something more than just your monitors and bus sends. And of course, the main output is going to be real typical, default, just like this, and rarely would you need to change that. All right, if you have any questions, let us know on YouTube or check out our Facebook group, Behringer XR.